Hey, welcome back to another Friday Tech Workshop. I'm Joseph, a senior developer advocate with AppSmith, and today we're going to break some stuff. Oh, he just said he's going to break some stuff. What are we talking about? I'm talking about date and timestamp fields. There's like a million ways you can do it wrong. The backend is expecting a full timestamp with the time zone, or you want just the date, but the user puts in a timestamp. The dropdown or the input widget gets changed to a different type, or the column in Google Sheets gets changed. There's like just so many ways to break it. And sometimes those things work themselves out. There's this implicit typecasting when you get into databases that will look at the input and it knows what format it's supposed to get, and it can just do some magic for you to save it in the right format. So we're going to look at a couple use cases where it's working properly, and then we're going to break it. Let's check it out. All right, first we're going to try and break Google Sheets here with some dates. I've got a query set up and just a real basic sheet with start and end date, an event name, and then putting in a timestamp for the created and modified here. So I haven't built too much yet. I just wanted to have some basics so that we can focus more on the date part instead of building an app. And I've got it to where I can add a row here. For the date picker, select a couple dates, and so the save is working, and it saves back to the sheet in the expected format. That's about all I have set up so far. So I've set these two date columns, it's in like the US format, month, day, year, with 4-digit year. And back here on the query, when I insert it, I'm just using moment, taking the date from the table here, because the start date from the table, when you select one, it's like a full date, a valid date with the entire string, and we only want this particular format here. Let me add a row so you can see this. So as I'm putting some values in here, if I come back, this won't be undefined anymore. There it is. So what I'm doing is using moment, saying take this value from the selected date there from the user, and then use format, and L is just like a shortcut. It says to format the date this way. You can also do a couple L's. There's like several different formats. Now it's showing the whole month and the time, but that's not what we're here to do. Let's see what happens when we change the date picker. So the first thing I'm going to do is we've saved one, we saw that's working, and so now I want to break stuff and see what still looks like a date, what's getting saved properly despite changing some stuff here on the front end. So I've got a date picker here, both of these. What I'm going to do is change the end date. We'll leave the start one, and for the end date here on the table, I'm going into the column type here, and before we change it to something besides a date, I could do a string, but first, let's just do minor changes here. Now the display format, this only affects what the user sees, display, right? The date format here, this is what's captured, what's actually going to get saved. And so I purposely put it to match what I wanted, but now we're going to mess with it, see what happens. So if I switch the date and the month here, and now just by doing that, I'm telling the entire table that this is the format coming from here. You can see that just broke the display because my data doesn't have dates in that format. I'm guessing the 25 here is throwing it off, because this could be, February 6th or June 2nd, depending on how you look at it. So I think these should work, but the 25, that's like, as soon as it encounters that, it just knows that this column of the table there, that can't be right. So that didn't take much to break the first one. All right, just by having the date format incorrect based on the dates that are in Google Sheets. So there's our first way to break it, is just not having these set to the right date type. That was easy. Let's see what happens if, I don't even think it's going to let us save, but I'll try it anyway. I put in the wrong date format, and so now it's on the end date here, 2/27, day, month. It's weird. Let me refresh here because it seems like it is not displaying. Oh, my display format's still the other way. So I'm capturing it one way and then saying to display it as another. So to me, it looks like it's displaying right because of that display property that is rearranging it. But the way it's captured should be backwards. So let's see what happens. And so the newest row here, it's still 215, right? Like that looks like it's still saved it properly there. So changing the type for the entire column here, the date format, that'll definitely break your display of the previous dates, but it looks like it's still saved back to the sheet properly. So the next thing I want to do is change this to a text input. Okay, and we'll add a new row and just type in a date. So this one we're still using a real date picker. And then here if I type a valid date, but I'm still just typing it, right? Let's first test that out. So we'll do tomorrow. And that save button is way over there. All right, now these are just strings. Google Sheets like has a format for dates, but it's not like a real date in a database that you can do that type of math on. At least on the front end. Here at Google Sheets, there's formulas that you could use, but at this point it's just a string, right? So it looks like we can save it as a string, and if the user is careful about typing it in, it still looks like a date. And if you had some formulas using these, that should still work. But obviously if the user types in something totally off that's not a date format, it's still going to save that. And now you're definitely going to break any type of formatting or formulas that are trying to use this. This one just came through and said invalid date without showing what I actually typed. So I'm wondering if maybe that's because I have formatting on here. It's on automatic. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to undo that then. We'll keep the date formatting. So I think that's good for dates. We can do a string. We can use the date picker. The date format of the date picker could be off. Now let's see what happens with the modified time here. So the ones I'm saving from AppSmith are coming back with the time zone and even like the decimal, fraction of a second here. But in Google Sheets, if you use their function for the current time, you'll see that it does not have the time zone. So if I wanted to match Google Sheets' existing format, I could strip off the time zone as I'm saving these. My first couple rows here, that's how I did this. I just said time equals now, and then copy and pasted that so it wasn't a formula anymore. But I don't want to use that. I actually want the time zone, so the couple that don't have it, that's just what I used Google Sheets formula for. So these are saving. They got the time zone. Now let's see if we can break this by changing the front end, the way that we're passing in the modified time. Now that's not something the user should be able to change, right? That's automatic. So I don't show that column in here and give them a chance to edit it, right? That's modified time is hidden, and if I did show it, I wouldn't want them to be able to click in here and edit it. So we will turn that off, hide it again. But the way that it gets set though is right here, just using moment without any other formatting. So if you did want to format this differently, if you did want to take off the time zone or whatever, then you could use moment.format. And in this case, I think 1L is going to give us just the date to modified. Oh, I'm on created timestamp. Yeah, and so there's just a ton of different like shortcut versions of it, or you can spell it all out if you want to have month, slash or hyphen or whatever you want to use, day, year. Okay, so that is working. That's a different way to construct it and send it to the sheet. So basically, it really depends on how you're constructing it. Here's a way to do it on the front end. In Google Sheets, you could use a formula to, say when a row's added, or use like a script trigger or something, but you don't really have the same features of a database where you can just have a column that auto stamps the time when it's created or auto increment. So there's only so much we can do here on the Google Sheets side, and it's not a real date. You can't do the query like here, get events. You can search on a column and say, give me values where it's greater than whatever, and that's going to work with a number. And in a database, it would work with dates, but with the strings here, you can't compare them the same way. So not as many features, and therefore not as many things to break. So I think that's it for Google Sheets. The fun stuff here will be when we get into typecasting on databases. So next we're going to check out with Supabase. I've got another sheet, another app connected to this similar data here. It has a start and end date, and then I created and modified. And in this case, we're just going to mess with the end date again and see how that typecasting works, because this is a date column, but we're going to send some stuff that is either not a date or not perfectly typed or whatever it is, and see how that actually helps us, and then what it takes to break it. So next, let's look at this task page here. I use the generate a page from data. So if you go here, you can just pick an existing data set, tell it which one of your databases or Google Sheets or whatever it is you want to use, and from there you can select which table. So I've got the tasks there in the public schema, and then that'll generate, I'll go ahead and finish it, and we'll use this new page. So it generates a full CRUD page for you and just save you the setup. We're going to use this to edit some of the start and end dates here. And the first thing I'm seeing, just right out of the box, it generated a CRUD page, but it doesn't know that date column, it doesn't know we want to display it as only a date. So it is just a date in the database. It's not a timestamp. And that's why all these are 0. And then my time zone is -5, so it's basically 0. We only want the date. Let's fix it before we break it by changing the format here, the display format. And I'm just going to go this way this time, year, month, day. So the underlying data didn't change. I just changed the UI to display it the way that we want for the user. We'll do that here as well. Okay, and now let's just save some values, make sure it's working, saving the way that we want. So I'll add a new one here. And this generate a page thing is pretty cool. It does save you a lot of time, but it doesn't really know which columns are your ID or editable or whatnot. So let's hide the ID. And the created and modified, we don't want those in there. And now I'm going to create a new row. We'll set this to tomorrow. And let's see, where's my save button? Ah, there we go. Submit. Okay, first error. The ID. Yes. This query, even though I hid it on the form, I hid some fields, but it's still trying to insert into the task table an ID. That should not happen. The ID gets created by the database, so we can take out that value and the field label there. And that could be it. Let's go back and try saving again. And this form here, fixed height, auto height, there we go, that's better. And that's saved. Okay, back here, here's our new row, and both those look like dates. We're good. So we're ready to break it. I've saved a couple values here. These, I could have swore I picked the 28 though. Let's add one more. So did that run the update? This form, insert modal, it's going to run the insert query and then reselect the records. And it's got some extra stuff here for an alert and whatnot if there's an error. But basically this just runs the insert query. Okay, that is this one here. And the values come from the form. Yeah, I think that's right. 29th, and submit. There it is, 2/29. So it is working. Maybe that date thing got reset before I saved the last one. Okay, 2 different columns here. Both the dates are working. What we're gonna do is keep the start one and then keep trying to break the end date here. So this is where it gets fun. We're gonna understand a little bit about typecasting with Postgres. And I want to pull this up. So in Postgres, you can use this cast function or the cast operator, 2 different syntaxes for the same thing. And based on whatever data type you're trying to save, this can help you ensure that you're sending a string into a date field and it actually gets saved as a date or a number field or whatever it is. So if you wanted to take a string and cast it as an integer, now it's going to use that string value, but all the comparisons and the queries and things will treat it as a number. You can do the same thing with dates here. You want this input string and make sure it gets read as a date. And then there's the shorter format. Most of these use the longer expression here, but that's the alternative. You can have your string, double colon, and then the type that you want to cast it as. That is explicit typecasting. When you do it, when you say cast it as whatever. The other way though is implicit typecasting, which is your database knows that this should be a date field or a number or whatever. And if you don't use typecasting, but you send it a value that could be a date, it looks like that's what they meant, it will do that for you. That's implicit typecasting. So let's see how that helps us out here, putting in some weird values. And to do that, I'm going to change this end date right here. So on our update form, end date, instead of this being a date picker, we'll change it to text. What am I looking for? Text input. All right. And so first, we'll just give it the exact date here. We are updating row 1 ID here. And so let's actually give it a totally different, oh man, I should be in preview mode here so that doesn't drag. So what I'm going to do is make this a 12 and update. All right, it saved. That was row 1 here. Yes. So first thing is just sending it a string instead of a date from the date picker. And that still worked. It still captured it and saved it as a date. So next, what happens if the string that we send it is not a perfect, valid date? If it's just something messy, like, I don't know, we'll leave off the day at the end. So if you tried to save this into a date field in Google Sheets, and then you had some math that looked at 2 different columns and found the difference or whatever, this isn't a valid date and it's probably going to break. If I save this, oh, we got an error. Okay. So at this point, it is not accepting that and it's not getting a chance to do the type casting on the back end. So let's see why. Our insert query, no, this is the update query. There's some extra logic here when you use the generate a page thing. It's a lot of extra stuff in here. This is just a ternary operator for every field, and then it's basically a fallback. If they're not using the form, then go with the preloaded data. So if you hide a column in your form, it'll use the form data that's coming from the form when you first set it up. Otherwise, you want to use like the source data is the initial value that the form was created with, and then the form data is the one that the user input. And so a lot of extra stuff here to look at, but it's really just to make it more robust, and so that you don't have to check if the user has access to that field or if they could edit it. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're looking to see why this end date did not save. So I'm going to simplify this and only look at the form data end date. So we'll get rid of the ternary operator. And the end date then is just this one field. All right, and now end date here. Okay, let's try it one more time just to make sure that didn't have anything to do with it. Same error, where unnamed portal parameter number 4 equals this. So at this point, it is not taking that value at all. It won't let us put in something that's an incomplete date. Before we try explicit typecasting, I want to try just a few other strings. So we're still on row 1 here, end date. When I left off just the day there, that didn't work. What if we do like just a year? Okay, so let's do slashes instead of hyphens. That works. I think this is a good example of how typecasting helps you out. So I'm sending in a string, and I use slashes instead of hyphens, right? If I was sending this to Google Sheets, you would see the difference. One string would have the dashes, one would have hyphens, slashes, or whatever. But in this case, it stays consistent. It's a date stored in a date field, and there's no question. It's not a formatting thing. So that's our first kind of demo of typecasting assisting us here. We're looking at the end date. This is text, okay? And I put in like, you know what, let's try. What happens if I do 1 slash and 1 hyphen? Oh, that's a start date. So that one is an actual date. Here we'll do slash and then hyphen on this one. And I'm going to do some extra spaces just to, we're trying to break stuff today. All right, the extra spaces and that's 2 different things at once. So what if they're both slashes? That's saved. Okay. 212. Right. So typecasting's helping us out. If it's a string that looks like a date, it doesn't matter if it is slashes or hyphens. How about backwards? What if I do 02 slash 04 slash, and then we'll get rid of all this. Okay, and let's just double check here. This one is on 222. And we are saving it with a date type the other direction. Cool. So that's implicit typecasting for you. It helps you by ensuring you don't break it. If you typed in a valid date in any format, front, forward, backwards, it's figuring out what's this user trying to type here. How would this become a valid date? And it's consistently storing it back to the database as a real date in the same format every time, regardless of all the weird stuff that we're doing here with text. So that's pretty cool. That is implicit typecasting. I'm wondering if we can find a case here where implicit doesn't help us, but explicit does, and it's the exact same string. So what if we tried without a end date, or like just a month, and that didn't work. Just confirm here. So maybe this can be our case. I'm going to try to make this save as a date with explicit typecasting. So that is the end date. And on the query to update end date, first let's just try date like this. Should probably use uppercase. Still failed. Inserting value for this binding. All right, let's look at the example here for, I wonder if they have an insert. Cast this string as text or date. So let's try that. Cast, parentheses, and then we have the string as date. Still failed. Wonder what would happen if we take out all of the hyphens or dashes or whatever. So end date here. Okay, that's saved. Let me change it so I can verify it's not the last value there. 7. Yeah, cool. Weird. So like no spaces. It just knew since it started with 2024 that it must be in that direction. And now it doesn't even know like the split, you know, like there's a group of 4 and then a character, whether it's a dash or a hyphen or whatever. Oh, let's try periods. Come on, here we go. I think that worked too. Yeah. So, man, implicit typecasting is pretty cool. That's going to save you a lot of headache. Normally, your input should be coming from a date picker anyway, but it could already be like coming from another table, or you're importing, or a different API, whatever it is. So there's plenty of cases where that is still needed. I was kind of hoping I could find an example where it fails with implicit typecasting, and then we can fix it by adding our own. Do we try just a year? Because now I've got that cast as date on the query. What about a 2-digit year? So what if I do 2/07/24? Like, that could be a date if there was slashes and stuff. Cool, that works. Yep, and it's the year 24, even though it's like 2-digit. What if the year, now we'll try to trick it. If 24, like that's pretty obvious that it's this year, right? What if it was like the year 2013, but that could be a date too? 07, like all of these could be a month or a day or a year. So what's it gonna do? I guess that 13 couldn't be a month. Huh. So 12 got interpreted as the day when it was first. 12, 11, oops, 10. So which one is going to become the year now? Here it's year, month, day. So maybe it'll go with 2012? No, 2010. So yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity when you use the 2-digit year. The string that I'm sending in, you can change all kinds of things, the slashes, the order, whatever, with a 4-digit year, and it seems pretty good at getting it right. But then when you make it a 2-digit year, that totally got something different than what I was going for. But I was typing it year, month, day. What if we do some more 2-digit stuff like the 10th? So like US format, month, day. And I want to use ones that could be a month or a day. And then if this is 2023. So let's see if that catches it as like October 12th, 23. It did. Cool. So I think that's about as much as we can do from here. I want to go back to that implicit typecasting now. And it didn't work with just a year, so well, I don't know. We'll see what happens with just a day. Update query here is taking that string and trying to cast it as a date. And end date 4 here. Okay, it still sees it as 12, but we're telling the database to cast it as a date. Still fails. So for typecasting, let's look at dates here. String as a date. And their oh, like they have the month here too. I hadn't thought of trying that. When you're sending it as a string, in their examples, it is a full date in either case. As double. That's a different, kind of like a decimal, different type of precision. Is that it for dates then? Here's another example. Your string that you're capturing, that could have a timestamp as well, but you only want to save it as a date. So you could do some stuff on the front end and like split it by the space or the T if it's a Unix timestamp or whatever it is, but you don't have to do that. You can like send in the entire string and it should only say the date. So I didn't think to try that over here. Like two more things to try. We want to use the month name and also pass in an entire date like this, timestamp, and see if it still only gets it as a date. Right now we're using explicit typecasting. I added that extra part to the query. So does this. Yes, it saves. And there it is, yep. Even though I gave it this full string, it just got the date part, so that's cool. But that was explicit typecasting. So let's get rid of that again and go back to just that field by itself. Okay, putting in a time stamp here with it, and oh, I want to change this so we can actually see a difference. Cool. And now the month name. So that worked. What if, I'm trying to think of like a common typo or, what if I just put like FE instead of February? Nope. But if I add the B, weird, man. So Postgres is doing some cool stuff on the back end that looks at text, you know, the month names, April for 2024. Yeah. All right. What if we use some of the text stuff and get one that doesn't work, and then try explicit typecasting on top of it. So that, and I didn't spell out February all the way, this fails. Let's go back and make this explicit again. And is it still there? Yes. No. So it seems like the behavior, or the how flexible it is, how smart it is to interpret, doesn't change with explicit or implicit. I'm not actually sure when implicit stops and you have to add your own, because it seems like we're getting implicit's doing everything that we need and explicit isn't doing anything extra. So far, I haven't found one that helps. It's probably a date thing. I think if we were doing numbers in an integer column and we threw in some text with it or something like that, we maybe would see better results as far as the difference between explicit and implicit typecasting. But this has still been pretty cool, like learning experience here, to trying to break it every way and seeing how much typecasting helps. This is pretty cool. So I think this is about it for breaking date columns. But I want to try a number one. We're going to pivot here from only doing dates, and I want to try one new experiment before we wrap this up. So let's add a number column. We'll make this a regular int, numeric. We got a ton of options. I think I'll just go with int 8. I think that's pretty common here. So I'm going to save this. We have a new number column. So we'll come back here to the UI and refresh to grab that column. So the table widget and the JSON form, they both just look at the underlying data and add that automatically. I didn't have to add this new field here, but it thinks it's a text. And actually that's what we want in order to break it. If we were building this, and wanted a good interface, we should set this to a number so the user can get this nice number picker here and it validates it and stuff. But what we're going to do is keep it as text. All right, and it's a text field, but there's a number in it, so that should work. Oh, the query doesn't have that field. So the form added it because it's on the back end, and the table saw it. Even though it's empty, it should see that column. Yes, there it is. But it didn't go update my query for me. That's not going to happen. So I've got to do that manually. Set number equal to, and then we want to use quotes. Oh, it's a number field. We don't want to do that. Update form data dot num. All right, that's what I was missing. This should save. There it is. Okay. This is a number column. It's not going to let me put text in there. My input is a text input, and I typed a number, so it worked. Now, what if there's some, I want a different number, because it might just take the 4. So let's see what that does. Fails. All right, the text has to be only numeric. What about a space? That's saved. Cool. I think that's different than dates. Pretty sure that failed on the date when I added a space. So we're finding some differences here in how typecasting works with each field type. What about lots of spaces before it? It's still a 5, but it didn't fail. The query didn't give me an error. So leading, what about leading characters? Now E, this could be an edge case because E can be interpreted as a exponent, and you'll see this in Google Sheets too, that if you've got a column that should be all numbers and then something in there has an E, that can come out and look like a totally different number. Here, maybe because it's an int column, it's not using exponents. I don't know. I thought it would be pretty cool if one of these E's became like an exponent, expanded it out to the full number. So text in a number field does not work, but spaces do, and they get trimmed. What about other characters? Still no. Okay, it seems pretty locked down on the number field. It's an int. What about a decimal? Still no. And just to double check for location, whatever, the comma, other version for decimal. So none of that stuff is getting through. Now let's try all that stuff again with explicit typecasting. Cast that as int. Several options. We'll start with this. And oh yeah, down here. So now we're telling it no matter what, you want to save this as an integer. Let's just try it without any weird stuff first to make sure that we didn't break anything. Okay, that's working. So now, all the other weird stuff we tried. Letter still fails. What about character at the beginning? Nope. We know the spaces worked before. What about a negative number? That works. Okay. So since this is an integer column, it's not letting me do a lot of stuff like decimals and everything. Let's change the column type. So we have a couple different lengths of integers here. There's a couple types of floats. Exact numeric of selectable precision. You know what, bool? That could have some fun typecasting stuff there too, like T or true or whatever. But I want to try float real quick to see what other formats we can squeeze in here. Since float has more characters that are allowed than int, like the decimal and stuff that just failed. Who knows what else it allows? Let's try and break it. So now that it is a float column, this should save. It didn't work a minute ago. Let's refresh. All right. Does the negative still work? Yes. Decimal. Still fails. Integer. Float. Let's try numeric. Still fails. And this, let me double check, it is still using explicit O as int. I just changed the column type. Yeah. So I'm breaking it now because of my extra stuff instead of letting explicit or implicit typecasting do it for me. So let's try again here. All right, now we can save decimals. So there's two characters so far, the minus or a period. I wonder what a comma would do. So like, depending on your region, location, you know, the comma and period get switched. It's not allowing a comma as a decimal. I wonder if that's because of the region set on my computer or something on the database side. A period with no number after, what about two periods? Okay, you'll allow one of those. What if we have a bunch? No. What if it is just the minuses? Nope. What if it's just periods, but there's more than one? No. Okay, and all of that is typecasting as a float for the float column. I'm going to wrap this up here in just a minute, but I want to take off the casting because I changed it to a float column, and just try a couple more things here. Still does not work with more than one period. What about just a minus sign? No. -0. Just 0. How big can I don't know how many characters I can hold. Did that work? Yeah. All right. So I think that's enough breaking stuff for today. What we saw is that Google Sheets, since it's not actually a date that it's storing it as, a little more flexible, less features around dates, so there's less to break, really. And when it comes to the date column here, we saved like a full string that had the timestamp as well, and it just ignores that and says I only want the date. Typing in the month name and sending that as a string, and it still figures it out. That stuff was pretty cool. And then here on the numeric column, it's pretty locked down. I was kind of wondering if the string had letters, if it would strip that out. You know what? One more try on the float with, hey, it's showing the E. I tried that earlier on a numeric column and it didn't work. So E, maybe it works on floats? Whoa. E is the only letter that you can use here. Okay, that's pretty cool. We found a little Easter egg. So there's some similar weirdness in Google Sheets that I've seen in a column that was supposed to be an ID, and then the random number that had an E in it kind of looked like an exponent, and it totally threw everything off. It broke relationships, broke an app that I had based on Google Sheets. So you should probably put stuff like that in a database so that it fixes stuff like this for you with this implicit and explicit typecasting. Pretty cool stuff. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. This has been fun. If you got ideas for other tech workshops, I'd love to hear. Post a comment. Feel free to reach out on Discord. And every Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, we're going to have some type of workshop like this where we're demoing new features, or maybe we try to break some stuff again. Let me know what you guys got in mind. This has been fun.